do a handstand and then an overhead handstand back heel, which he'd hit it on the heel and it was dramatic, right? So I'd be doing it in the park for him. He did it before games at Bury, he did it at Old Trafford, but it was such a dramatic sort of trick.
Welcome to the Eye on the Ball podcast. Here we are in the dressing rooms at Turf Moor Burnley Football Club, kindly donated to us by Burnley FC in the community. We're going to talk about football, of course, and we're going to focus in this particular episode on youth development. I've got Mike Phelan and Paul McGuinness with me, two people with fantastic histories in football. Both ex-Manchester United, but perhaps more importantly, and wearing the colours today, Mike Phelan, ex-Burnley FC, where his career started. Mike, you made your debut for this football club 17 years of age.
Yeah.
What did that feel like and how did that come about?
Well, I was obviously a supporter of Burnley Football Club as a kid. You know, my dad, my uncles, and I'm a ex-BO lender. That was where we all went as kids. But then joining the club at 14, really, whilst I was still at school, you know, being invited down to this great club and training with what was then the apprentices, which was a terrific experience. Making my debut at 17 was fantastic. Just to be actually involved at your local football club, or to get your debut and playing with players that you'd supported as a kid. You'd see the legends of Burnley Football Club, and then playing alongside those players was just, you know, so cliche dream come true, but it was.
And Paul, yourself, majority of your history, Manchester United, not just yourself, your father as well, from a footballing family. Your dad, former Manchester United player, won a couple of First Division titles, what is now the Premier League, and also had the honour of taking over from Matt Busby as manager of Manchester United. And you yourself, as a young football player, also from school, went into the Manchester United system. What was that like?
It was fantastic, yeah. It was a dream to sort of follow in the footsteps of my dad. But also, as we mentioned it, because we're here with Mick at Burnley, I came here sort of on trial or to train. Went to Gawthorpe, stayed around the corner here in Diggs. My godfather, Gordon Clayton, who was goalkeeper in the youth teams at Man United, Busby Babes, was the chief scout at the time, brought me here. And I remember very clearly the training ground was fantastic. You know, it was something really at the time. Nobody else had that type of quality of training ground that they had here at Gawthorpe out in the countryside. And I remember really clearly training with Trevor Stephen, who then went on to Everton and to England and Rangers, who was a fantastic player. And I remember at 14, he was an apprentice, and they had the shooting boards, didn't they? The boards up, and we played between the shooting boards down at Gawthorpe. And he really stood out, you know, so that was, you know, something special, you know, having a bit of time here at Burnley and myself, yeah.
We're going to talk primarily about youth development today, and a lot of that, there's a lot of research out there, which is used these days for coaching courses, in terms of building coaches and how they interact with kids, children, young players and develop them. And a lot of the academic stuff that's out there sort of says it starts with a love of the game. They call it the romance stage. You were sort of 3 years old, I think, when your dad was made manager of Manchester United and came up through a football family, probably sentenced to a life in football. When did you first start to fall in love with the game, and what did that look like as a young child?
Yeah, it's funny you say so, Dave. I was very clear. I can remember it really clearly, kicking a ball in the garden with my dad, passing it back and forth, and then he bent the ball. He curled it down the grass, not far away from me. I was only 4 or 5, you know, that age. I remember saying to him, "How did you do it? How do you do that?" You know, it was really captivated me. And he said, "Well, if you just take the ball to the side, turn your body a bit, and you hit on the side of the ball, and you carry on and follow it round. When you follow through, it'll bend." And it did. And that was me hooked, you know, was against the wall, against the garage, absolutely captivated with every bit of football. And then you go to the games, we were talking before about football grounds. I went to every football ground, my dad, when he was at different clubs. I particularly remember at Old Trafford as a kid going into the main entrance as it is now, but the dressing rooms were on the left, and they had a very specific smell. And later on, John Cook, who worked with us, they call it Seven Oils. It was like going into a hospital a little bit, but with liniment and all that. The rub on your legs, and the smell was incredible. And like they've got here, a big bath, which I remember them sort of pretending to throw me in as a kid, all that sort of thing. The swivel chair in Matt Busby's office, because I was only 4 or 5. So all those things I remember really clearly, yeah.
And would you do things such as dream of picking the team when you're in the swivel chair?
As a kid, I didn't realise people didn't do it, but as I grew older, I found out, you sort of found, well, aren't you dreaming of football every night? I can promise you, Dave, I dreamt of football every night, every single night, whether it was scoring a goal from the halfway line that you'd seen Pele attempting or whatever it was. I was just so in love with it and dreamt of it all the time.
Did the goals go in your dreams?
In the end, because my dad, I used to go on a field and practice from the halfway line. Every time we went on the field, we practiced from the halfway line, and it was only a university game, but I did score straight from the kickoff once. And I think that was partly through the dreams. You know, I thought I could do it. I believed I could do it because I'd done the practice with my dad, and then I'd in my mind, I'd read it through so many times, yeah.
My early practice came through, my mum and dad were textile workers. We lived in a town called Nelson, and we had a gable end wall, a terraced house, gable end, and on the gable end, you get all the advertising boards and things like that. So me and my brother Marcus, we just practiced kicking a ball against the gable end. It must have drawn my mum and dad mad, like, to be fair. But, you know, you'd have a picture on there, or it'd get changed every other month, something, and they became your target practice. And then you'd play the curvies, you know, you'd be trying to hit the curve, and the ball would come back to you. Everything was sort of repetitive against the wall, really.
Yeah. Well, my dad, yeah.
We never got into team games or anything like that. Just me against my brother. You know, you get the courts down, you play against each other, take each other on, and score a goal and start again. But it was all sort of thought practice, really, in a way, repetitive practice, and that seemed to work. And then it blossomed into, you know, my dad did shift work, my mum did shift work, opposite shift worked. So, you know, there was an exchange. You know, you go to school, and then, you know, you'd probably have an hour where you could see your dad when he was doing the back shift. Then you'd go on the local park, and then you'd play with your dad, and his mates had come on. So you'd play cup ties and one goal, and all these things develop skills and an understanding of the game.
I was going to touch on that, sort of the skill development, and there's a term called deliberate play out there, which it seems like that's what you're engaging in there. Are you working out, when you're getting feedback from the ball, the sort of weight that you sort of push a pass, or you put it against the wall or against the curb? How does it react in different conditions, rain, dry, things like that?
You used to learn things like angles, because the ball had come off the wall. You know, if it was a flat wall, then it was obviously a little bit truer. But if it was sort of a stone wall, it could hit the stone at a different angle, and you reacted. Kirby was the same. You'd hit the ball and you'd react to that. They were all things that you just played. You were just playing and having fun and working things out. It wasn't actually he was playing football. He was kicking a ball around and mastering a ball and learning all these skills of, you know, we talk about now, ladder work and you know, movement of the feet and changing body positions and all that. You did all that because you were reacting all the time to what it was thrown at you, really. And that was the way I developed very early on, and then obviously it shifted into more the team side of things.
Your father was in the game, so we've sort of talked about that deliberate play where you're falling in love, you're working it out yourself, and you touched on it there, how he taught you how to bend a ball. Did you get lots of instruction from him? Did you ask for it, or was it just part of life?
He was never pushy, but I pushed him. I wanted him to come on the field and play with me when he could, or what have you. The standards were very high on that sense, even though it was playful. If I pinged the ball at him and it missed him, because he had a bad hit because of his leg. He's razor.
Is that because of your bad passes?
No. So if you missed a couple of times, it make you go and get it. You know, he'd say, "Well, that, you know, you've got to get it to me." So he was strict like that, but he was full of fun. My dad, he had loads of tricks, but he would take me out on the field, a big sort of fence, and we'd make a goal between two sort of posts of it, and it was headers, diving headers, overhead kicks, all those sort of things, which gave you a target, but also he was like always, I think volleys, overhead kicks, you've got to control your whole body. So it's very useful for the rest of your techniques in the fact that you've got to have spatial awareness and so on. But he had the best ever trick that I've ever seen. And he got it from Real Madrid when United played Real Madrid in the 50s. After Munich, they played before Munich, but then after Munich in charity, in sort of benefit games for United. And there was a guy called Hento who was the winger, and he watched them in training, and he used to hit the ball straight at his head. He'd dive forward and do a handstand, and then an overhead handstand back heel, which he'd hit it on the heel, and it was dramatic, right? So he would I'd be doing it in the park for him. He did it before games at Bury, did it at Old Trafford, but it was such a dramatic sort of trick, and he loved all that. But he had me doing overhead kicks and everything, which, funnily enough, stood me in good stead, because when I was very young, joining a United coaching staff in my mid-20s, and Cantona had just joined at that point. And they said, well, Cantona did a lot of training after training that have influenced the others. The young lads were already doing that. But after training, he didn't know me, Cantona. I'm watching the training, and after training, he pulled me and said, oh, will you cross some balls for me? I was like, I better be good now, But luckily, I'd had a lot of practice with my dad. So I'm crossing these balls, and he's volleying them, he's overhead kicking them, he's heading them, and so on, chesting them down. Well, what was great about it, and I call this like the spirit of football, he then said to me, okay, your turn, I'll go out wide. And he's crossing, and I'm the young coach, and I'm heading him, doing overhead kicks and all that. But it was just like, that was what he was about, the spirit of football and the practice. But like you say, it was very deliberate practice. We knew what we wanted, we knew the volleys and so on. But also going back, some clubs do it quite well. A club that in the Northwest who's done a great job with young kids doing it, and they practice religiously against the boards around the pitch. And they were doing it one day, and the kid was there, and I said, oh, right, where are you aiming for? And he went, the boards. And I said, yeah, but where? And he went, the middle. And I went, oh no, it's got to be more accurate than that. And that's the key to this sort of deliberate practice. Mm-hmm. You've got to have an aim. So I said, see the crack between the two boards, let's have a competition. Now, if it's competition, hands up. Now, if I'm having a competition, I can do it on my own. So if my left foot's not as good as my right, I can go first to 10. I'll give my left 5 head start, and let's see. And that's how I would make it more interesting. But also, I could make it different, because they say also that you need repetition without repetition. It's not the same exact you want. You want to now come at different angles and try different types. So that would be the way
so you're
I would
changing
practice
the challenge
as well.
all the time.
You're changing the challenge, but with you're learning how it affects different parts of the. If you hit different parts of the ball, or you come from a different angle to hit the ball, and all those things are really important for kids growing up.
Would you keep scores against each other?
You keep scores. If I'm playing Mick, we would have it all the time. I used to do it at United when I was youth team coach. We'd have the portable goals, full size, but I'd take the net off one of them, and then we go on either side and we try and hit the crossbar. So it'd be like 1st to 10. Nobody beat me. I'm talking to all the stars. And the secret was I was in charge. So I'd say, no, I'd go, right, 1st to 10. And I go, okay, now 1st to 20. And I'd keep going until they got, basically I starved them into submission. So I give in, we're going for lunch,
See, my challenge was a little bit different, because even when I was younger and I was playing those sort of 1 hour sort of sessions, my dad wasn't a footballer, but he joined in. But his mates who he worked with were decent footballers, amateur footballers. So we'd end up with probably 10 adults just for an hour, and then there'd be me and maybe one other kid, maybe even my brother. And my challenge was to compete against grown-ups, even when I was younger, and they, believe you not, those grown-ups want to win. They want to win no matter what, and it was just a game, just a nice game of football, probably one big goal and then a couple of courts at the other side, but you're playing, you're finding your way through problems and solving issues that, and a lot of it was physicality. So you learn little disciplines even as a kid. You're not aware of them at times, but you're learning as you're playing, and it's competitive. That's the thing. What Paul says, you're actually competing now, and you want to be better than the next guy, and you want to be better than your dad, and your dad's, encouraging you from even the sidelines or even on the pitch when he's watching you do things with a football that he's probably amazed at. But you're learning on the job. You're learning as you're doing it.
It's a great example of deliberate play and the implicitness of it. It's sort of happening in a natural environment.
We didn't have goals with nets on, what I mean? And where we used to go, and next to where the factory was, it's still there now. It's called Bull Hole. There's a river. There's a river that runs behind one of the goals, and now with no nets on the goal, if you were missing the goal, you just go and go, the ball
You're
can
in
end
the
up in
river.
the river. You know what I mean? So your practice became purposeful, not to put the ball in a place where it would end up in the river. So all those things are just, they stick in your mind of increasing your accuracy, thinking a little bit deeper, making sure everything was right, so you didn't end up in the goal, you didn't miss the goal, you didn't play where you lost time. You lost time in that hour because you're trying to get the ball out of the river.
Did you both play other sports as well? I mean, with the sort of modern academy systems, not just in football, other sports, there's debates about early specialisation now and children going in at 7, 8.
For me, it was probably different to Paul, but we had football season and cricket season. There was just the two sports, really. You may get the odd little bit of something at school whilst I was growing up, but it was mainly football head on in football season, cricket head on in cricket season. But ultimately, it became everything with a ball. Everything with a ball. I mean, I was never in a group of playing tennis or golf or anything like that. So it was one or the other, but it was ball orientated, team orientated all the time. And then you specialise in your skill within that team. And that was whether it was cricket or football. And I think that developed your awareness of sport in general, but camaraderie and things like that.
Yourself, Paul, do you play other sports?
Yeah, I loved all sports. In fact, that was my 2 aims, well, 3 aims in a sense. I wanted to be a footballer, but my mum always said, if you don't make it as a footballer, you've got something else. Now, because of my dad and hearing stories about Jimmy Murphy, I knew I wanted to be a coach even before I was playing. And then my fallback was to be a PE teacher. And luckily, the school I had in York, we had a guy called Pete Bibby, who was the Great Britain volleyball coach. And he used to come in for maths with his blazer on, with the Olympic sign on. I was like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. But what they did, they had house games. So you played all against the different, it was Celts, Normans, Saxons, or you did all that every games lesson. You played rugby, football, cricket, basketball, volleyball. You played all the sports, athletics. It was an amazing school. They let me play both rugby and football, and I think you learn quite a lot from playing both. Lots of things about timing, looking for spaces, changing direction in basketball, football, and so on. Cricket, I think, is a great game in terms of like football's very sort of quickly reactive, whereas you've got time in between to think about your tactics. But 1 against 1, how I'm against the bowler, where's the field. But then that's the sort of thing that transfers.
Psychological skills.
It transfers, yes, big psychological, but it transfers to football as well. Where should we be? How can we beat the opposition? So all of those things I absolutely loved, and it was a fantastic school for sport.
Great
really
influences of teachers as well, the enthusiasm of teachers. I had a great headmaster at my sort of junior school, Mr. Ted Parr, but then his sort of sporting teaching was sort of Mr. John Wright, who's still around now. We still see each other in the village, because I live in the village that I went to school in still. And they were great influence because they promoted sport. They wanted you to play sport. And if you had that little bit of something in sport, they generated the enthusiasm within that. And your school became quite a dominant school from a sporting perspective. And that was really a big influence, because that opened up the challenges that laid ahead, really, with inter-school games and, getting the better of your neighbouring school and stuff like that. So you're suddenly thrust into a world of challenges through sport, but you react to that because you want to be the better one, you want to be the better team, you want to be the better school in your area. And all those things lay the foundations for when you really start to think, I can do this, I can go and be a player, be it cricket or football. In my case, it was football. And that was all the learning processes got me to that point where I ran at Burnley Football Club. You were scouted, you're invited down. Now your next challenge is you're playing in a football environment all the time and I was 14, like I say, played against 17-year-olds down here at Burnley, and learning how to handle yourself at that age, giving a lot of years away. And a year's a long time. 3 years is even longer, but then you go into that first team environment, and it's just magical because you've just learned all the processes along the way.
How did you survive? I mean, it must have been tough. You're coming in at 14, the 17-year-olds there. That can't have been a walk in the park for you.
No, because you realise you've got something that you really enjoy doing and you're having fun doing, and you just want to carry. I can remember I lived in Nelson. I can remember literally either catching the bus or running from Nelson to Turf Moor. I can see it. You know, I used to start by thinking, well, I'll go to the bus stop.
That's what,
Then the bus,
5-6 miles?
then the bus wouldn't arrive. So you go to the next bus stop and wait for it there, and then that would come. And then before you know it, you've done 10 bus stops, 20 bus stops, and you're nearer to where you want to be, so you don't get on the bus. The bus goes past you, but you're arriving a little bit later. But you do it, and that's the way. You know, I was decent stamina, decent runner. Maybe I got that through doing that. I don't know, but I just wanted to get from my house to here to play football with good young footballers and be coached by some really, really good ex-pros at Burnley Football Club, which were terrific for me.
So just on that, we're talking about teachers there, professionals that are in the game where you're coming in. Did you have role models as well, either of you? I mean, I watched TV. There was people like Kenny Dalglish was the big man at the time, JPR Williams in rugby, Steve Cram, Seb Cole. Were you influenced? Did you watch these people? Did you want to be them?
Well, I was influenced by the Burnley football players. You know, I can remember the likes of Ralph Coates, you know, and that sort of ilk, you know, and then you're moving into the Martin Dobsons of this world, the Leighton James of this world, and many more, Jim Thompsons, Billy Rodaways. All these influenced me to a degree that I wanted to be part of that. I didn't necessarily want to be them, but I watched them, you know, and I was in their environment.
I think it's
at
more
certain
of,
times.
Do you learn things or do you try things? You sort of see these people playing and think, oh, I wonder how they do that, or can I do that?
Yeah, you do. You pick up things. You know, I've always been one that watches things, sees things, and then try to use it in a way that I want to use it, not copy it as such. Try and develop it for your own benefit. And that started really early where, you know, like Paul was talking about kicking a ball. We all think we can kick a football, but how do you kick a football? And what's the point of kicking a football? From A to B, how does it get there? And what's the type of pass you make? These types of things. When you watch different players playing or different players executing certain things, you can't but not learn if you look at it closely. You have to go into the detail a little bit, but you can see how a certain address of the ball creates a certain scenario. And I learned all those things through doing. That was the thing. It wasn't, you know, it was about mastering the ball, but doing and being in an environment which challenged you enough to keep doing it, and then finding what was good and what was not so good. Dismiss what's not so good, keep what's really good. And that's the way I seem to progress.
So we've touched on the early years there, the sort of falling in love with the game, the natural side of what might be the catalyst to entering professional football. Just moving that on a bit, Paul, you've worked in what we call the modern system now, the academy system as it is under the Elite Player Performance Plan. And they are different, aren't they, across the country and across the world. Let's start again at these early ages, perhaps sort of the 7-8 when they're coming into clubs up to 12. You worked at one of the best. Manchester United have produced more players than most out there, if not more than any. What does good look like? What does a good environment and a good culture look like for those sort of 12s and under?
I think Mick said it before, you know, you got to fall in love with football, and generally those kids that get brought in are mad about football, and you've got to make sure the environment keeps it like that and ignites it, really. You want it to get even more that love of it. I call it the spirit of football. So everything about what you're doing needs to be like that. And it's very important to remember the different stages they're going through, and the fact that they're kids. So at that point, they've got, when they start 8 and 9, they basically do anything. You know, they'll have a go at most things because they've not got inhibitions to get to 13, 14, 15, 16, or they may be a little bit inhibited about doing this or looking a fool. At that point, they'll have a go at most things, you know, but they're quite egocentric. You know, come at 8 and 9, it's all about what they can do. So there's not so much of the team and that sort of thing, but you need to take the best out of each of those, each stage. So how can they get better individually? And then it's like a step by step. I say it's a little bit like, probably for people who think, well, how would we approach this? It's a bit like, well, why are computer games so popular with kids? Why? Well, they give them something exciting that they like, and then they give them a target to aim for, and then they realise, they can see themselves improving. They've got that grade, and really, that's what you try to do with kids. You're giving them a new set of skills as they go along to build on the next one, and then you go to the next step. So, all right, that's exciting. Now maybe we can play a 2v1 with Mick, because I've got pretty good on my own. Now we'll play 2v1, and it builds up. So that progress, I think it's a progress principle is the best thing. You're seeing them motivating, progressing like that in terms of enjoying what they can do with the ball. And of course, without it, because you want them to learn how to win the ball and be enthusiastic about chasing back and the whole game. But yeah, it's that enjoyment factor. And a big danger is you make it too professional. I call it premature professionalism.
Yeah.
And if you get that too soon, you think, well, they've got a long way to go before they need all that.
Oh, absolutely. I think
so.
I think you touched on it there. You mentioned the word mistakes, and kids will make mistakes in these early years when they're learning.
You have to have a sense of adventure as well as a kid, because a lot of it is dreams. You're young and you want to aspire and you want to do better, but you've no idea of time and you've no idea of where that journey is going to take you. You're just in the moment and you just want to express everything in the moment, don't you? And it's unlocking that with kids, letting them open up, letting them be themselves. And I think sport in general does that, but certainly football, when you've got a skill, you can open it up and then you can challenge it and you can actually develop it and get better. And you can see a certain, you're getting better and you're making steps. And I think it's all about the adventure and the fun of the adventure and having people along with you who can develop that adventure for you. That's the really important thing, that not only have you got that little vision and that adventure, that people around you have the same idea. They have the same way of saying, right, yeah, okay, let's go for it. Let's go for it. No fear. Let's do it. Let's practice it. Let's go again. Let's come in tomorrow, do it again. All these things have got to be encouraged, to bring it to the table.
Would you encourage the coaches to have that sort of creativity around their curriculum, for want of a better word, to sort of get that freedom in and let players?
Yeah, I think so. But there's also a danger that people have said, oh yeah, the game's the teacher. That's just give them a game and that'll do. Now, yes, to an extent, as long as they're learning from it. So you've got to have a clear idea when you devise the games, the numbers involved in the games, how will they learn certain skills. So if you're not careful, if you make it too small a pitch with too many players, then they can't see the wood for the trees. And what you really try to do is make it quite clear to them what's the next step. So going into the technical type of stuff, what's important, if I'm playing against Mick in the back garden, I've got to have certain skills to be able to get past him. So I might have to drag it one way, then just knock it and go. Well, that's the first step. Now Mick's going to cotton on to that, get his body sideways. So I might have to go to the side and then go against his flow that way. And get past him. Now, if he goes to block it now, I might have to get my body in between and get in a turn. If he goes the next time, it might be disguise. So all these are the little steps that you want to be pointing out. Now, if you're trying for a game that's too complicated too soon, they're not going to be clear, those steps. So they're very simple things that you want to learn as a kid. Change your speed, change your direction, using your body as a barrier, disguise. A lot of them will come out naturally, but the key at that age for the coaching is to give them a game where it'll happen. If it doesn't quite happen right, then you step in and you might say, well, have you tried changing speed more? Or wait till the guy's on your shoulder before you turn. Little tips like that.
Yeah. Do you involve the kids in the education? I've taught in schools, not football, but they're brighter than you think sometimes. They'll solve their own problems, or they'll recognise things that they might try to be able to solve the issue that you've got. Is that?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing about learning is doing it. So do they do it? And then, ask them the question, well, how can you do that better? How could you protect the ball? How can you change speed? How can you fool him? How can you make him think you're going that way and go that way? Those would be a lot of things. But just as Mick said before, one of the biggest things that's being missed, opportunities to learn, is to mix age groups. So that it's like if that computer game is you're at level 2 and 3, you can knock it past them, you can drag and jog and turn, but you can't yet do a 1-2. Well, if you go in with older players who can do the 1-2, then they're going to teach you how to do it. And that's a process. It's a process we used at Man United, even with under 18s. We had Paul Pogba, Lingard and so on, and 15, 16-year-olds, and then people like Rashford joining in when he was 12. Now, everybody has to understand the safety of it, but you find it's like playing with your brother in the park. He's not going to smash you. but you make sure it's very clear, and the older ones are there to teach the younger ones, and the younger ones can learn so much from joining in.
I think there's also
skills
an element of. I think there's also an element of how do kids learn, because everybody learns differently. We can always, talk to a group of kids and explain one thing to them, but do we actually understand who understands that in that group? Because some get it, some won't. So it might need a different skill as to how you communicate with that one individual or the few individuals, because we've all done it. We've sat in front of groups of people and you can guarantee they'll all say, yeah, understand it. But 2 minutes later, what was that again? So some need to be, communicated with differently. And that's whether they learn it through seeing it, doing it, or, writing it down, all these types of things. But you've got to get onto that level of how do you understand the game. And Paul made a great comment there. He's also getting them involved in the discussion, because what are they feeling? What are they thinking? And explore that really as to, why did you do that? Or how did you do that? And most of the time, skillful people or football players, even at the top end, on the low end, they just do it. You ask them, how did you do it? They'll say, well, I don't know, I just did it. And then you start to look at it a bit deeper and go a little bit more clinical into it. And there are reasons why it happens. And you break that down, and then they educate themselves a little bit as to, wow, all these mechanisms have got me from here to here. And, in one move, there could be 6 or 7 different things going on there. But if you break it down, you understand the process of it, and you come out of it with a better understanding of when to use it, how to use it, what's it good for.
Yeah, I would say, Mick, one of the biggest things false coaches can have is think about feedback.
Yeah.
They start giving feedback to the kid, when really the biggest feedback is from the kids to you. Yeah. Now, if you set up the practice and you know these things are likely to come up, they're going to have to drag and dodge, they're going to have to accelerate and turn, they have to use the body. Then if you set it up, what the kids do will tell you if they've learned that yet. Oh, no, he hasn't quite learned to get his body in between yet. Or she hasn't got the idea of stepping in front of the opponent to block the path to the goal. All these are the little landmarks, I call them threshold concepts. It's like riding a bike. Once you've got it and you understand how to do it, say playing a 1-2, you've got that for life, and then it's really enjoyable, Yeah.
This type of thing, we're talking about developing fundamental skills really for football. How important are those before you sort of go on to the next stage where we're talking about systems and tactics? Because surely that won't work without the fundamentals, will it? And how long do you spend on that? Or is it how long is a piece of string? I mean, I guess the question is, what's the importance of the fundamentals? How good do they have to be at the levels we're looking for in professional football?
Well, they have to start by mastering the ball. If they can master the ball and they know the principles of the ball and the connection between you and the ball is vitally important. Then as they develop their skills through mastery of the ball, they start to then go into smaller groups, and then communication comes in, working in a small group, then building it into a team. But all that is a development phase that gets them to where they want to be. All kids want to play. They all want to play teams. They want to be against people and play. But within that sort of session, that is the end bit once you've got the other little skills in there. And then give them the freedom to play, because those skills will start to come out and they'll start to show. And then you'll get the dominant players and you'll get the not so dominant players. But ultimately, it shows you what you can work with as a coach.
How quick do you move the dominant ones out or up?
Well, that goes back to what Paul was saying a little bit about playing them probably sometimes outside of their age group. It's difficult. It is difficult, but you have to create that environment. But you can step them up, because, most children of any age want to be 5 years older than what they are right there and then. But they want challenging, and they sometimes do show things very, very early, and they want to be moved on. And then it's a case of when, how, and is it good enough for their well-being? And does it require them going, trying it, and coming back down to the level again and experiencing all those things? So there's a skill in a coaching method there, I would think, as an individual coach, as to when to do that, but also having those safety barriers for them to know that it may work, it may not work.
Are the older ones learning, Paul? Are they learning leadership skills when they've got young ones in them? Mentorship, captaincy?
Absolutely. That's what I found when we did it with 12, 14, 16, 18-year-olds. It was a bit like the older brother You know, looking after the younger one. You created a band of brothers feel, so that if you've got a kid in your club who's 12, like Rashford, and then you've got Pogba, and then later on they end up playing together in the first team. Well, you've got all those links. Really important. But the other thing about that is sometimes it's important to keep them in their own age group. It depends what you try and learn. In some of those instances, it was like they had to think quicker, they had to move quicker, they'd get more combinations that they wouldn't get if they didn't play with an older player. But when Marcus Rashford came into I was taking the under-18s, so he came in a year earlier, under-16s, but he wasn't strong. He was slim, build. He'd just gone through a year and a half where he'd had Osgood Slatters, so his knees were sore. So he was a fast winger, like you see, dribbling, so on. But he had never played up front at that point, and he wasn't really strong enough to do enough of the runs. So he grew. Then at the end of his first year full-time, he could have easily gone straight to the reserve team squad. But this is where you have to have a whole staff that are understanding things, because Warren Joyce took him for some training and the odd game, but he kept him with us because we were doing more work. We said we were going to concentrate on you running behind. So it's a different thing, playing with your back to goal to learn how to face forward, run behind. So we had a whole setup where he'd learn to open up. So he'd create a path there. He'd run across here, he'd run and make diagonals, or he'd maybe come short. And he was learning all these runs. Now, if he got successful because he's training with people he's actually better than. They could feed him and do it, but he could get success. He played in the under-18s, he got more success. He scored more goals, and he was practicing something. If we'd have put him up with the 21s, they were all stronger, quicker. He might have played on the wing. So that was actually someone staying in their own age group because the learning environment was quicker and better for them. And I think something like 3 to 6 months later,
that happened.
He played in the first team.
That happened to an ex-goalkeeper at Burnley Football Club who's now at Manchester United, Tom Houghton. And when Tom was at Manchester United, he was sort of an up-and-coming goalkeeper. And there was a moment when Tom was sort of, is he going to make it, is he not? And we actually kept him on for a year because we wanted extra goalkeepers for selfishly shooting practice. But Tom had 1 year at Man United where he was sort of doing all the goalkeeping practices against the likes of Scholes and Beckham and all these players, where, you know, he'd gone from sort of his age group into the senior side of it, and he was getting pelters all the time. You know what I mean? He was getting burnt in goal, but he actually grew in stature. He grew in confidence, even though he was getting probably picking the ball out the back of the net more times than saving it, but he got physically stronger, mentally more aware, and he went on to play for England, you know what I mean? And he was an accomplished goalkeeper, but he had probably 6-12 months of purely just training against some of the best at that time, and everything changed for him. Everything, his awareness of the game changed. Sure, he would acknowledge that himself. And he's had a massive, massive career. All through that one moment where, is it going to happen, is it not? He steps up a little bit, he becomes a bit of cannon fodder now and again, but he became England goalkeeper. And that was just through having that physicality and that sort of mentality that he wanted to do it, he wanted to achieve, and he wanted to push himself, and possibly through hurt as well, you know. I mean, he was getting, the ball he was saving at times was 100 mile an hour compared to what he was normally getting. And everything changed for him. And he was a credit. He was a credit to himself to actually go through all that and make a goalkeeper out of himself.
We've talked about different scenarios there of sort of that latter stage youth development where you're building them up. Sometimes you sort of, they're out Paul, and you're monitoring that. You've got specific context, reasons for doing things. Tom, you've just talked about that one there. Experience with the first team in a training environment to sort of get exposed to something that's more difficult for him where he's survived. I just want to take you back a little bit. As we mentioned, 17 years old, you're in Burnley's first team. And you look at your career, you stayed in that. You then went through to Norwich, you then went to Manchester United. You don't look like you ever looked back, really. You just went on and on. How did you survive? How did you learn? Because you surely weren't the player at 17 that you were that was at Man United at 26.
No, when I first started out as a player, I just wanted to be at Burnley. I saw my life at Burnley. I saw my whole career panning out at Burnley, and I wanted it to be a progressive sort of. Burnley were in, I think, the old second division, third division. Then, they started knocking on the door, but it was always a bit of a yo-yo, up and down. But the moment I made the move to Norwich was like a further development thing. I can honestly say I didn't know where Norwich was at the time. I was sort of in a bit of a situation at Burnley. I'd had 1 year with John Bond, which was terrific for me from a development point of view, because here's a big city guy, coached some decent players coming to Burnley Football Club. So I spent an extra year here. Then I went to Norwich, and it was passed on in a way to Ken Brown, Mel Machin, who enhanced exactly what was going on at Burnley. I don't know whether that was,
Were they coaching you? Were they talking
yeah,
to you?
a
Did
lot
you
of
review
coaching, a lot of
games?
development, a lot of coaching, a lot of sort of communicating about the game, and the level went up. The level definitely went up to Norwich, who were relegated at the time. I think they just won the cup. They got relegated. They qualified for Europe, but no Europe was happening. Went into that setup, and I went into a team like with Steve Bruce, Chris Woods, Dave Watson, and many others who were still at the club who got relegated that year. And that took me to another level. It definitely challenged me to want to go again, playing in a higher division. And then obviously over a period of time, Norwich got better, got stronger, I became captain there. So all these development things were happening. I was getting mentally tougher, physically tougher. And then Man United come along, and I'm from the area. Man United is a place to
dip
want to be.
into that while we can sort of keep it at the youth and the learning level. I've been lucky enough to work with you for quite a while. You're quite an inquisitive guy. You read a lot, you ask questions, you always sort of, why, how do we do that? Were you like that at that point as a player? Were you?
Yeah, I was. I was quite shy in a way. I always felt as though I would listen more than actually talk. But dressing rooms at that time, when you're a kid and you come to Burnley Football Club, the dressing room is a different environment. You've got your dressing room, then there's the first team dressing room, and that's a completely different place to be. But once you step in there, you never want to come out of it. But you grow up quickly in sport. You grow up quickly. 17, I'm making my debut, and suddenly I'm a man. I'm a man in a man's world, and you're doing things completely different to being a kid. Although you try and keep your enthusiasm as a kid. But then you've got a lot more responsibility. You've got responsibility of a stadium and a football club and fans and things like that. And then it just progresses on to the next level. And then it just eventually takes you to where you want to. Your dreams become alive because you're on that pathway to getting there through work and effort and having good people around you. It's really important to have what you consider good people around you that can bring you on and accept you as being a kid.
Does that give you confidence, the people around you?
It did with me, yeah, because my sort of, the players I looked up to when I was standing on that terracing are the players I'm in a dressing room with and I'm training with and I'm playing with. And for me, that's like every day happy birthday. Happy birthday. And all the time they're seeing something in you because, believe it or not, they don't want you in there if you can't deliver what you need to deliver with them. So you start to pick their brains, you start to see how they act, what's important to them, what's not. And you get this unity, don't you, of all wanting to do well together. And that's where the team building comes and you want to do it for supporters as well. And my family were all Burnley supporters. So there's that extra edge. Moving on, Norwich became that other family.
Yeah.
And Man United became an even bigger family. So it was a projection that I dreamed of and I managed to achieve.
Going back into youth football in the academy system, Paul, I want to talk a little bit about the latter stages now. We've got age groups, as we know, and then we have youth teams. You're fortunate enough to work at a club that's got a fantastic history in terms of its youth team. I think it's 11 FA Youth Cups they've won. How important is getting into that youth team or getting that first contract, and does that change from the schoolboy element to now being a full-time professional employee of a football?
Well, I think the way it is now in academies, there's such big businesses right from the first level they're probably making it almost too important. You know, you see 7, 8-year-olds with the crest behind signing the form, you know, and you think we always used to try and keep that really low key because you know what a long road it is. And I know from my own sort of not making the career I wanted, what a big effect it has on you. You know, when you don't, it hits people really hard. So to build that up when you're really young, I think is a mistake. But it's a competitive business. So if one club's doing it, then the next club's doing it, and the next club's doing it. And that's where I think, you know, you've got to be really careful in the sense of how much you build it up. Because little Johnny that's at club X, Y, or Z, you know, all his family is around, coming round at Christmas and there, and his aunties and uncles and everybody else knows him and has got that identity. And then, hang on a minute, what happened? Oh no, he's left. He's been released, you know, so you've got to be really careful how far you build it up. But at the same time, the problem is, you like Mick says, you got to have the dreams, so you can't kill the dreams, but try and keep it as low key as you can in that sense. But obviously, the closer you get, the more important it gets, and when you get to full time, then yeah, you're really in there. I said at one point I would have kept the bit lower, and then like you used to have from 14. They're the ones who are going to mix near the first team. They're the ones who are going to be closer, maybe, and that keeps it still steps where you think you've got to get to. Because if you're not careful in academy, it's like you're in and you think you're there all the time, but you're not. You've got to keep getting in. So yeah, it's tougher and tougher as you get further up.
As you're up there and you're in this youth team, sort of 16 to 18 system, you're in a league now. I know they're localised, and you've got things such as the FA Youth Cup, and with the higher clubs such as United, the European competition as well. How important is winning? Does winning become a part of it? And is that something that they have to learn as well?
Well, that's what you're doing all the time, surely. You know, if you're teaching them each task, you want to flow towards the goal. So everything is a task. I've got to let the ball run across my body, but before that, I've got to look. As the ball comes into Mick, he might have his back to goal, he might have to shield it. You know, as he turns and someone comes close to him, I might turn again. The next one goes out to the wide man. It's every little piece of that is a task you've got to get good at.
So they're processes that you're having to win.
Each bit of those leads you further to the goal. Do you score more goals? And then do you do the opposite to stop them? So all those tasks and skills build you up to winning. So the better you get at all of those, the more likely you are to win. Now, that's not the only part of it, because then the next bit is the psychological part of, you know, well, what happens if it goes against you? The game goes against you, the refereeing goes against you. You've got to be tough enough to do all those. But sure, everything that you are doing surely is aiming to win. You know? I mean, these people say it doesn't matter if you don't win. Well, of course it does, because the players all want to win.
Yeah.
And if we're teaching them the right things, where people maybe mix it up is that if you've got a lower level of skills, you've not been through all that process, you're more likely to win if you kick it up the front and you close it down and you harry as a kid, you might win more. You know, but to actually learn all those processes, you might have to lose a few games because you're not quite there yet. But as it got closer for us, it got closer to where the first team are, you're going, well, they've got to learn how to win. They've got to be able to do it under pressure, with a crowd, with a stadium. Mm-hmm. And that's where the Youth Cup or the tournaments really came into play, because then we treated it like the first team. On the first team bus, they wore the blazers to the game. The pressure, we put them under pressure because of the history and so on. That was the real barometer of how, you know, were they going to win?
Yeah, and winning is like your
mate.
individual thing as well. There's a winning mentality individually for yourself, isn't there? To win, to me against you, to win that battle.
Yeah.
Then there's that element of group winning. You know, are we your best defenders? We won our game by defending well, and I would say that's the same in midfield and up front. Then there's the team mentality and winning. Are we all on the same page here? Do we all want to win? Or do we just want to score a goal and lose but I've scored the goal sort of attitude? No, so it's all fed into this, all the scenarios feed into the winning mentality, this mentality of how do we win? You know, there's an easy way to win, there's a hard way to win, but it's still winning. And if that's the essence that you've got in your head, you can smell winning. And that's the point of the team sport. The team sport is to make sure everybody's aligned and smell the winning mentality and then go for it. And you're going to lose. You're going to lose games. But the losing then becomes the next step into winning, because you learn from that quickly. And the quicker those individuals do that, and the quicker the team does that,
at this stage now, where Paul's just described it, it's the FA Youth Cup, the games are at Old Trafford, they've got the Blazers on, they turn up on the coach, the bus, they've got the pre-match meal, everything that the first team gets. You're at first team level at this point, and you were coach and assistant manager to Sir Alex, and you watched a lot of those games, probably some of the earlier rounds as well, and I know you used to watch them on MUTV. What are you looking for, and what is it that you might see that possibly takes these people to train in the first team?
You're looking for a certain level of skill, that's for sure, but you're looking at attitude and application. Depending on the moment, you're problem solving. Can you problem solve? And that's sometimes not always visible, but you can actually, because you've been in the game a long time and your experiences tells you can sense that somebody's thinking through something, and that's all part of your training. But obviously, that what you are looking for is what makes the difference, who makes the difference, what makes the difference. Can that difference then be brought into a different scenario higher up? And a lot of it also is, are they enjoying it? Are they a true reflection of your coaches and your coaching mentality and your football club? Are they actually representing your football club in the way that coaches are coaching? What is that tradition? What is that background? What is that, that sort of, that journey that they've gone on, and are they enjoying being part of that journey? And getting to that moment where you see games, but then you see finals, and it's a completely different approach. The journey's great, and sometimes you only see the final, but there's a lot going on underneath. So it's that appreciation when you're watching it, the joy that those people out there on the football field are really, really up for it and enjoying all those things that they've learned and trying to deliver it.
Yeah. And I think while you're doing it with young players as well, you're looking for what's their outstanding asset, what type of player they're going to be, how they're going to be. So I remember I was really young. The manager said, right, you're doing the job, Centre of Excellence Director, which was unbelievably, it was enormous at the time, because you go in, you're in charge of all the local scouting, all the coaching, so on, and then they started to put teams on. So the first time it really hit me how important the job was is I went to watch Manchester boys playing at Bellevue, and the scout was called Tom Corliss, who was an old scout from Manchester. He was a great guy. So he said, well, look, he's in the Centre of Excellence, but he's coming up to 14, signed schoolboy. He was also going to the national school. And he said, that's his dad over there. So his dad was up by the side for Bellevue. And his little brother Reese, remember Reese as well? He was running about he was a nuisance, running everywhere, in and out of the sandpit at Bellevue by the running track. So I watched this game, and we had some terrific. Rick Wellens was in that team. He was a really good player. We had about 4 or 5 in it that were all at the Centre of Excellence. But then this Wes, Alan Griffin was playing centre half, another lad who was a really good player. And I watched Wes, and I thought, geez. And now he's going to sign probably. He's already in. But if he didn't, wow, and it was my fault, I thought, geez, this kid's magnificent, because he was so athletic, so calm, so competitive, And I remember later on he played for us in the Milk Cup, and they had quite good crowds in
That's the youth tournament in
Ireland. Yeah. So, and he's playing under, I don't know what age group, but he cleared the ball, and the crowd applauded. It was like so athletic. The ball came down the line. He sort of got past the lad and cleared it back over his shoulder over the halfway line. And the crowd went, whoa. And then another time, his last yard in his tackle was unbelievable, wasn't it? It was like, ooh, bollop, bang. He's so quick. I thought, this lad's...
We used to say, Wesley when he tackled. You've been Wesley.
Oh, because his last yard, did you? And he was but he was so quick. If he hadn't had the knee injuries, he'd have had 70, 80 caps for England. He was fantastic.
When
so you've got to see, when you see something in them like that, he was going to be an outstanding defender, defender. And
I mean, he went on to have a fantastic career for United and England.
And a great lad. You also knew, he's a Manchester lad. He's got so all those things you start to see, and you think, yeah.
How do you deal with those when they come in? You've identified talent straight away. When you've seen them, do they need less coaching? Is it a bit of guidance and work it out yourself, or
It's a
how
bit of
do you
everything
work?
really, because they come with chaos, but they come with ability, but they do need guiding, and they're very, very energetic, most of them.
Because you
and
can
they're
overcoach, can't you? And sometimes knock things out.
The big thing then is it's like the next step. Like I said, the computer. Like,
Yeah.
you're playing it, and now you go with the first team. Now that's like,
Yeah.
it's like everything speeds up, everything's quicker, everything. So the players are teaching them really,
Yeah, yeah.
and Mick's like guiding on little things, and that'll be how, and that's how they do. They learn from playing with the older ones, and that's knowing when's the right time. We did that. I did that with a few of them. So Tom Clever's tiny. He was tiny all the way through. Then he gets to a stage where you say, well, but he was so, he listened to everything. He was such a good learner. He was so bright. And I remember saying to the manager, you need to take him training with you. So he took him training, and he came back and he went, yeah, I like him. He's got really good eyes. What's that mean? Got really good eyes. He's got good vision. I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
Because when you were talking to the group, his eyes were like, they were like that, looking, sucking everything out. And well, he's a kid who's going to learn a lot with the first team because he's going to take it all on board,
That's the environment. You create that environment where you don't want to take away their personality and their character, but you want to put them into a challenging environment where what's accepted and not accepted at one level is different at another. And I think the players do form that. They create this environment, and when we were really successful, that first team environment was pretty hot, and it's an acceptance. We had many discussions over the years of who's the next kid or what you got, and sometimes they've reached a level with Paul, and Paul would say, go and have them for a couple of days, take them. Will you just take them for good? And we had a really open mindset, really, of doing that, and a lot of our quality training sessions at the time when we had those movements from the academy up was probably the day after the game. So that, your first team would play, but then you have a group together. So you'd have a lot of good players that weren't playing that evening or that day. Then you'd throw in a little mixed bag of some up and coming, put them all together. And the ingredients are incredible, really, because you see all sorts going on. But it's an introduction. And then they get a smell for it, they get a taste for it. And then they go back to Paul, then they come again. And it's all part of that education. But the players start to see it. The senior players start to see the next level, the ones that are coming through and who can handle it and who they've got to be afraid of because they're coming in. And that was half your job done, if not most of your job done as a coach. All you did was set up the proper practice, let them get on with it, and then you get personal with them, and you ask them. And the first question you usually ask a kid that's moved up is, how did that feel? What did that feel like? And they're buzzing. They're absolutely buzzing. But they're exhausted. They're mentally and physically exhausted because first thing you usually say is, wow, that was brilliant, but it went off quick, really fast. I could do everything 100 miles an hour. And then you start to say, well, you don't always have to do that, but that's excitement. And then they start to get a feel for it. And the longer they can stay in that group, you see massive changes in them, and also the acceptance of the others. Because believe you me, if they can't bring that to the table, they're not accepted. You get shifted.
If that does happen and they come back to yourself, Paul, let's say they've had experience with the first team, it's okay, it's not quite perfect. Can they go back and then go back up? Is there a world where that happens?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it happen all the time. Man. That's part of the test. But also, it's like going to that computer game, like I'm saying, and you can't work it out first. What's the kid going to do? I'll go back to this one where I'm comfortable for a bit and I'll get a bit better, and then I'll go back up there. And that would happen, all the time, or they'd go on loan or so on. But I think one of the really important things to talk about here is the standard. Knowing the standard over years. So we might have had somebody, so it reminds me of him that went into the first team and did well. He reminds me of him, or I could talk. But there's that consistency also. But also, if you want a youth policy, you need to have that consistency of staff to the first team. And that's what happened there all the time. So Mick can trust my opinion because he's seen me do it before. Whereas if you go into most clubs now, there's a churn of the manager He doesn't know the people there. They can't really trust them. They're probably not even in the same building. You know, it's really important that the staff are in the same building, so you get that communication just over lunch or breakfast, or you can just walk around and watch the training. So all those things are really important in a football club that's really complex.
So you've got to
pull that all together,
yeah,
you know?
A holistic, sort of psychologically safe culture where people can talk, they can interact with each other, and you've all got the same goal, really.
It's challenging, though. It's not. It's psychologically. It's challenging.
It is challenging, but it comes back to that. It definitely a standard. There are certain standards that you have to maintain, certain standards you have to get to in order to progress. But also the environment's really important. And you know, we can talk about Manchester United all day long, but that environment at Manchester United meant that some of Paul's kids could sit next to in the dining room with the first team regulars, and that communication, and yeah, it's nervy, it's edgy, but they're actually living it. They're living the moment, they're living the dream. If you get the segregation, which I think probably happens now at football clubs, not all of them, but some of them, where's the continuity? Where's that process of older guy, experienced guy, come on, sit down here, let's have a chat, let's eat together.
Yeah.
But even non-communicating sometimes is a plus, because you're just there. You're seeing it, you're feeling it, you're hearing it.
I think
and we did a lot of that. Probably it may have been conscious. It may have been a conscious thing that we did, but sometimes it was unconscious, because a lot of stuff happened when everybody was together, but everybody was a footballer at Manchester United.
There's a great phrase for it. To learn, really, you've got to be in the room.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's out on the first team pitch, in the room with them, in a dressing room, in the coach's room, in a dining room, but you've got to be in the room. And like Mick said, when I was doing education welfare, I'd only just stopped playing it a year before. But I just sat in the coach's room, listened. Brian Kidd, Nobby Stiles, Eric Harrison, the manager, some of the senior players, Robbo would come in, you're just listening. You're learning so much. And that's generally what a young player will do if they go in a dressing room or on tour. They'll be on the edge looking. In fact, we used to have a cage where we'd play. And when we had the 18-year-olds, 15, 16, 14, 12, the younger ones would play by the edge of the cage. They wouldn't go in the middle because they were just 180 degrees and having a look. But after a few weeks, they'd be in the middle where it was all going on.
Yeah.
And you'd learn. And it was that sort of complex. In the same sort of thing in the dressing room, you go in, you just listen, you learn. And then slowly, well, some don't listen and learn, and they get their legs cut off because they go in too fast, you know.
When you say they're on the edge, are they getting a taste of it? They're sort of, you can play a pass off them. And...
Yeah, exactly, on the side, yeah. But then you go in the middle, you got to really know what's happening. But it's only the same would happen. They used to, most clubs years ago, but Beckham, Giggs, Scholes, they go with the first team, carry the kit. That's what they did at first, all that. They go carry the kit, they don't get changed, they just watch. And I would take kids, 15, 16-year-olds in the car, a couple of coaches, we go to Anfield and we go in the away end, then we go to Villa Park. Sometimes the man say, well, bring them in the dressing room. So they just get a little look. And slowly you do that. And you do that with all your ages. I mean, that's what I did as a kid. I followed my dad around all these football clubs. I'm at 10, 11, I'm in at York, 12, I'm training with the apprentice who is 16. At 14, I'm in a Bury with the reserves. Then I'm in with the first team. You're just joining in. And that is one of the biggest ways to learn, is to just be around it all. And then they'll let you go again. I mean, the most incredible thing, Graham Carrick, Michael's brother, was at the FA with me, and he said, look, you've had football privilege. And I have grown up with that. When I was 15, 16, I played charity games with Man United against Piccadilly Radio or Man City. So I'm playing with Bobby Charm, unbelievable. George Best one game, Nobby Stiles, Crerand, and also against, but sometimes with Bell, Lee, Summerby, Doyle, all the City people. Roger Hunt one game. I'm in a dressing room. You remember they did a Carlsberg advert? It was like if Carlsberg did Sunday football teams. I was playing in it at 15, 16. It was amazing. Bobby was dropping his shoulder, left foot, right foot. So what I got out of that, just being in the room with those people, seeing them. I remember Franny Lee picked it up on the corner of the halfway line, 18-yard box, gave him the ball, and he ran straight for goal. And I was behind him. And he went past. And then he got to the box and he tripped up over the lad, got a penalty, and he got 15 penalties a year, didn't he? That's what he used to do. But being in that environment, whether it's a young kid going with his dad to his Sunday league team or whatever, then it's great if you can get in the room. That's how you learn it. Football, it's more doing, seeing, feeling than anything else.
We've talked a lot there about sort of youth development and a system, a culture, an ethos, if you will. Yourself, Mike, in the first team environment, particularly at United, also you brought players in. Wayne Rooney, 18 years old. Ronaldo, 18, 19 maybe. So this is talent that's been identified, and you've not perhaps in the entirety of your journey, you don't know what they were like when they were 10, 12, 14, etc. How do these people come into your team? How does the integration work? How do you coach them? Do you coach them?
Well, you have good people who obviously spot talent for a start, and usually those are pretty experienced people, or certainly were around about that time. There was, I wouldn't say there wasn't computers in them days, but there certainly wasn't the database that they had. It was purely go, watch, see, and know what environment you're going to bring them into.
Do you have to learn about them?
Yeah, you do. You do have to learn about them because, one, they're young, but they're already, you're talking about Wayne Rooney and your Ronaldos and these types of people. They're already accomplished players now. They're first-team football players, and they carry in a hefty fee on.
I'm going to say there's pressure from the fans and the media for these to deliver straight away.
Yeah, there is, and there's no hiding place from that. But what you're actually doing is you're trying to find individuals that will blend in pretty well, pretty quickly, but also bring an energy to your group of players that you haven't got.
And I presume they're still learning.
And young players at times, if you identify them right, they challenge the older players to go again and do more, rather than just enjoy being an older player. So they give you that sense of energy and well-being as to, right, we're going to go again here, and this has changed the dynamics. And that happened a lot at Manchester United. Yes, they paid some money for these players, but they were young, enthusiastic. You're talking about two players there in Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney who wanted to be the world's best. Certainly Ronaldo's attitude to being the world's best, he was at 17 in his head. He had a lot to do, along the way, but he produced things which got him to be the world's best, and possibly still is. He's still up there with that. Rooney's challenge was completely different. His background, everything. He's coming into a team where it didn't matter at 17 to win whether he was playing with a 34-year-old massive international footballer. He was Wayne Rooney, a kid that just wanted to play football, and you took him warts and all. And that was great. That was great because he challenged the dynamic. He changed the dynamic. So did Ronaldo. And then as a coach, that's challenging for you because it's taking you out of your comfort zone at times to sort of analyse them. What have they got? How can you blend that into your sessions you're putting on? And having of all of those, even as young kids, the winning mentality we talked about was exceptional. They just wanted to win and produce and play and grow and grow. And also as coaches, I was a young coach really at certain times. I wanted to do the same. I wanted to grow as a coach. I'd been the player, but I wanted to be the coach. And it's an interesting time that with the analysis and the discussions. Paul talked a little bit about talking to ex-professionals or coaches who played football who are within your group, but have found a level that they operate really well in. And it could be the 17s group, it could be the 21s, it could be lower down. Those people are valuable people to get to know, to understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, because they're working in that development phase. And at 17, even though you're getting players 17, 18 like Rooney and Ronaldo, they're in part development phase, even though they're the young stars. So everything's going on emotionally, physically, psychologically in those areas of their upbringing. So you rely on people who've been around them, people from, say, in Rooney's case, Everton, Sporting's case, with Ronaldo. You've got to tap into them types of people to find out what they've been doing and then take it to the next level.
Absolutely fantastic. A wealth of information there from you both. That brings the first episode to a close. We've talked about youth development, falling in love with the game, learning the game, role models, mentors, FA Youth Cups, getting into first teams, the pressure, young players that are being brought into football clubs, all sorts of information there. Thanks again to Burnley Football Club and Burnley Football in the community for allowing us to host the podcast here at Turf Moor. And we'll be back soon with more episodes on different topics. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe.